Okay, we're back, and this is not COMP397. It shouldn't say COMP397. It should say COMP308. I have COMP397 on my head. And I'll change this as we go. Merge technologies. So if you see COMP397, it's wrong. It's COMP308. We're talking about Ajax, XML, and JSON for this one, right? And let's talk about what Ajax is. So you might have heard of it already. I mean, if you don't know Ajax, it's kind of the, if you will, a very important technology for us to create this rich user kind of experience, interactive experience these days. We used to call it rich internet application kind of enabler, if you will. It allows us to create this interactivity with users that we didn't have the ability to do before. And again, if you think about what Ajax is, it's what they say here is asynchronous JavaScript and XML, right? But a lot of it nowadays, if I could rename Ajax, would be asynchronous JavaScript and JSON. So it'd be like Ajaj, because we use JSON a lot more, a lot of times, than XML these days. And why? Because XML is not that it's not bad. It's just that Ajax is more JSON is more popular. So really what we do is we send a request. Instead of using back-end technologies, like for example, before we couldn't do things that we can do now with Ajax. We need a backend. We would need a server in the old days. But what's happened over the years, this JavaScript framework or a library came out, and we've been using it ever since. So really, it's essential. If you don't have a knowledge of Ajax, then it doesn't allow you to access data and so on. One of the things that JavaScript can never do well, up until we just came out with Node and Node.js, is access files in the file system local to the server. And the reason for that is it's a security issue. Most browsers would stop you from trying to do that. Let's say you're building a game, and this is the way I look at it, and you want to get high scores for the game, right? For you to create a high score file, and you put it somewhere, like a flat file I'm talking about, without some kind of database, right? And you wanted to update the flat file. For you to do it with anything less than Ajax, as an example, you wouldn't be able to do it. JavaScript doesn't allow you to do it. In fact, even with Ajax, you might get some cross-scripting issues where most browsers will shut it down. You wouldn't even allow it. Would just not work. So this is one of the issues that we can get around by using something like Ajax. Let's take a look at that. So again, there's a couple of different data formats we use. Again, XML. What it is there's a series of nodes in XML where we describe our data, right? And this is what XML would look like. You would have a header for the XML. And then you'd have the outer node, which would be called management, right? Almost like describing the table, if you will. So this example would be a management table. Think about it as data in a database, right? Then inside the management table, you have a field called team member, right? Or a row, right, if you will. So all the team members are rows of data, right? So maybe the management then would be your database, team member would be your table, and then now you have your fields. Name would be Agnes, title, and bio, right? So those are the three kind of fields within the team member table, right, as an example. So again, we use the syntax we use is kind of like this tag. It looks very similar to HTML in terms of the way we create our elements, right? In fact, that's why it was so popular in the beginning. When we first started using XML, it looked very much HTML-like, if you will, right? It was another markup language, right? Very similar. But now we've moved on to this format here a lot more, and you're going to see this format more. And the reason for this is because JSON is JavaScript notation. That's what it is, object notation. And really, once you learn JavaScript objects, then when it comes to JSON, I know it's hard for you guys to see this on here, but this is almost exactly how we would create, our JavaScript notation. So for objects, so An example of this would be, well, once I've used these two brackets, if you remember correctly, let's see if I can move out of the way for you guys. If you remember correctly, we talked about this when it came to object-oriented programming in JavaScript a little bit. The left curly brace and the right curly brace describe a namespace, right? Which is exactly how JSON works, right? This is our namespace. Here I describe my database, team members, just like I would do here, right? Sorry, our table, team member. We don't have a management layer. I don't have that external node that tells me that this whole thing is called management. I could name it management. I could say var management equals to an open curly brace, closing curly brace, this namespace. This is how easily we can incorporate this into JavaScript. And this is why JSON is so much more popular these days, because you can create almost like a file that describes the data. And again, you could load this in through a database connection, or you can actually create a flat file of information if you had something that wasn't changing, right? For our purposes, as an example, we're going to use a flat file. We're not going to connect to a database right now. But team members would be your table, and again, your fields would be described with this key value pairs with commas that separate everything in terms of the data, right? Here, there's no commas. There's no syntax there. There's just tags. So this is why XML was considered at one point easy to understand. But JSON, JavaScript object notation, it now has become more popular because it gives us the ability to access field members. Like, for example, if I define something called at the very top, if I say this is a management table, I can always go management.teammembers.name, and I can use dot notation to access different field members in here, which is a little bit different than I would be using when I use XML data. So again, just different data formats that Ajax allows us to access. Again, XML being the extensible markup language, and JSON becoming this JavaScript object notation, which is the more popular version nowadays. So some really common properties and of members of the HTML, if you will, HTTP request object that we're going to be using for Ajax. For example, you're going to make different requests and so on. And we're also going to be listening for the different states of where we stand when we make a request. So again, we're going to send a request, to the with a get and post method. And again, have you guys ever seen the get and post method? How do we, so you should understand, if you understand get and post, we're going to make these requests. We're going to make an open, or we're going to either open the data source as an example, or send the data across, right? And so on. And we're also going to request a status or a ready state to see, where we stand in terms of in terms of our request. Let's take a look at some examples. And again, we create an event handler for this onReady state change event, which basically takes a look at the data returned by the method ready state, right? And we're looking at the status property, which is typically 200 when it's returned properly. So remember, we just covered jQuery a little bit last week, right? So actually last week and the week before. So this is jQuery notation if you look at it. So this is JavaScript. It says JavaScript. I don't know why this happens with my conversions. But document.ready, and in this document.ready function, it's basically saying, hey, when the document is ready, right, we create a variable, XHR, right, which stands for this XML HTTP request. This is for the XML piece, right? And then we create this new event handler called onReadyStateChange. And we use this anonymous function, right? This function, if you notice, when it's written like this, remember, it's an anonymous function if it's inside, if it's not labeled like this. We could also have mentioned this differently. So once we create this new object, once we use the new keyword, when you say XHR is equal to new XML HTTP request, we're using the XML HTTP request class to create a new object. And then what we're creating is we're adding in this event listener, this onReady state change, by using the dot notation. Because remember, there's two ways to add properties to an object, right? We could define the properties in the object ahead of time using literal notation. We could also use constructor notation, which we're doing here, and then we can add event listeners this way. Okay, so we've got an event listener, and we're checking to see if the ready state is equal to 4 and the status is 200, then we know we're ready to read properly. These two things, the ready state is 4 and status is 200, is what we're checking to see to confirm that we've got an open channel, if you will. If we don't have these two things, ready state 4, status 200, we won't be able to read the file properly. We'll get an error, right? Or we'll get the file won't load. That's what's going to happen, right? So here we're loading the XML data, and we're saying, here's my XML document. We're creating a new variable here. XML document is equal to the XHR, which is this object, response XML, right? The response that we're going to get back. Now this XML HTTP request includes a bunch of different properties. Let me see if I can explain this a little bit better with code. So let's do this together. I'm going to start a new project because you can't really figure this out unless you do it with me. Right? I can talk about it for days, but doing it is a whole other thing. So let's do it together. So I'm going to go into ASP.NET web application, and again, we just did this before, and I'm going to call this COMP308, and we'll call this Ajax demo. I'm going to create a new Git repository for it as well, so you can follow along. Right now, I'm just going to go into my GitHub, and when I do such a thing, it's important for us to try it out. Otherwise, like I said, we don't really quite understand what it is until we do it. COMP308, and we'll say Ajax. We won't call it a lesson necessarily. Ajax demo. Okay, because I think we need to understand how this works. Okay, so I've got my link. And again, for those people who remember how we did our GitHub, initial created initial project structure, and 2 seconds here, and then from there we're going to go into unsync commits, and there we go. Okay, we're cool. So we're connected. Let's create our project, and I'm going to keep it simple this time around. So I'm going to create our. I'm going to go add new folder. Let's add a CSS folder, and we're going to go add new folder here, and we're going to go with a scripts folder, and we'll make a lib folder here too, because we're going to need that in a second. Here's our lib folder, CSS, scripts. I don't have a lot of assets, but let's just add it in. We'll make a new folder called assets. I'll fill it up afterwards if I need to. And we're going to make a simple index.html page now. So here we go with just the same way we've been doing it the whole time. So here's our HTML page, and we'll call this index. And in here for our index.html page, I'm going to go to lang is equal to English, if I can spell properly. And you guys should know how to do this already. We've done it about 1 million times so far. Well, I'm exaggerating, but at least about 10 times. I've kind of gone over this with you over and over again. And our meta tag is going to be character set is equal to UTF-8. Again, we're complying to HTML5, right? And the other one that we're going to be using, and there's others, I'm going to be using meta. This is the first time this is going to take place today when we do this. Content is equal to viewport. Here, let's go back. Let's do this the right way, Tom. Name is equal to viewport, and content is equal to width is equal to width. Okay, so here we've got our basics. And inside our title, I'm going to put in Ajax, COMP308, Ajax demo. Okay, because we have to kind of understand how to use Ajax by doing, as opposed to just watching, because watching is boring, and it's going to make you guys fall asleep, and I can't have that. Okay, so let's add a new basic CSS page. So I'm going to go into Style Sheet and we'll call this app.css. And there's nothing in there right now. I'm just going to drag and drop underneath it like we normally do. And I'm going to create an onload. This is the method I'm going to use. Onload. When the body loads, I'm going to initiate this init method, which we haven't defined yet in our JavaScript file. I'm going to use pure JavaScript for this stuff here, I may also need jQuery because it's going to help us do a little bit of Ajax a little easier, right? Okay, so this is one piece I need. I'm going to create a JavaScript section here, like you've seen before. Okay, and underneath that, I'm going to create a couple scripts. One of them is going to be this JavaScript file, which I'm going to call app.js. Nothing in there yet. Actually, I'll start typing, and I'll put in a new function that I'm going to call init. Okay, this is our init function, and this is the one that's going to be called. We'll just do a console.log that just says app started, so we know we're accessing our init function. Okay, using good JavaScript, right? And we're going to pull this app.js underneath this JavaScript section over here. So there's our JavaScript. So we have a placeholder, a place we're going to use, we can actually do some work with. Okay. Now I need a couple of libraries, and I know I'm going to be using jQuery. So again, if I didn't have it, where would I go? I would go to the jQuery library online. For us right now, if I was going to go to jQuery, I would download jQuery 2.1.3. the latest library. Let's do that together. Some of you have asked in emails, if I could demonstrate this a little bit more clearly, because I already have it downloaded and they didn't know which one to go and get. So again, there's different versions. There's version 1.x, which is if you have previous versions of jQuery in the 1. stream. Some people use 1.9.0 as the highest level they want to go to keep compatible with their current application frameworks. Right? However, if you're just starting off, this, by the way, jQuery 2.x does not support Internet Explorer 6, 7, or 8 because it has additional feature sets. Right? Now, as of this course, I told you, as of this video, we don't care about Internet Explorer 6, 7, and 8. So I would say, don't worry about it, and let's go with this one. So I would go with jQuery 2.x. This is the one we're going to use. Now, there's different ways you can do this. You can use the CDN, like we talked about last week. Right, so the Content Delivery Network, which is a link as opposed to a local download, or you can use this compressed or uncompressed development version of jQuery, whichever you decide. Now, some people say, well, which one do we need, as an example? Well, again, what you could do is download both, right? One that you'd use for linking to your file, the other one that you would use for IntelliSense. Because you want to be able to get IntelliSense or code hinting from your Visual Studio, and it's easier for us to link that and create a reference path to the uncompressed version. Now, this is the one way to do it. If you were going to get it, you can go up here and grab it here. The other way to do it, which is easier, like I said before, is go into Tools. If you have NuGet Package Manager, you go into NuGet Package Manager. You go to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution, which is built in, and then you search for something like jQuery. So I start typing jQuery. If you notice, there's also jQuery Mobile I searched for before. And if I'm connected properly with, it'll take me a second, it'll pull up the latest packages for jQuery right here. Take a look. It's right built into, kind of this little repository of information. And if you notice, there's also the jQuery TypeScript definitely typed. TypeScript definition if I was going to use jQuery with TypeScript, which we're not. Right now we're just doing strict JavaScript, right? So here's jQuery. I'm going to click onto it, and then in the jQuery, click Install. When I do that, it says, hey, which project do you want it in? I want it for this one, and I'm going to press OK. It takes all the necessary stuff that I need for jQuery and drops it in. I need this library if I was going to do Ajax in a nice and easy way. And if you notice, here in jQuery, I've got not only the IntelliSense file, right? Here's the IntelliSense file for JS, but the minified file as well as the unminified file and the map file, which I need all of them nowadays, so the browser won't complain. If I take all this, I don't need it here out in the open. I want to put this all in my lib files, which is fine too, and it's not going to complain if I do that. So all I've done is I structured my jQuery to be inside a lib. Now I haven't connected it. I need to connect jQuery for me to use it. Right? So the first thing I need to do is I need to use the minified version of jQuery in my code so that it's not fat, right? So here's the one that I'm going to put in here. That's the first one I need to put in. It's going to go before my app.js because I need to access the jQuery library in here. I'm going to give it a little bit of white space here just so that you guys can see there's separation between this is the library and this is our app, which is empty right now. Now, inside my app.js file, though, in here, I need to have a reference path for jQuery, and there's a couple things that we can do. I can drag and drop my full library, which is right here, the JS file, not the minified version, the JS file, the full version, across. And when I do that, it creates this reference path for jQuery. And now I should be able to, if everything remains equal, I should be able to go into here and start typing $document. And if you notice, I'm getting this document. And if I go .ready, if I can get the document.ready, I know, absolutely know that jQuery is active. I'm ready to go. Okay? So I can use all jQuery features when I do this. And I'm going to have to do this for not just for here, for Ajax, but when we use jQuery mobile, we need to use jQuery as well, because we need jQuery first as an enabler before we have, it's a dependency, if you will, for the other frameworks. And actually, many other frameworks use jQuery as an enabler. We did that with Foundation, if you remember. We downloaded Foundation, and you needed jQuery for it to be, as an enabler, for it to work properly, right? So in the same token, we need to do the same thing with jQuery. Again, it's just a library, a JavaScript library that gives us additional functionality and shortcuts to do the same things we can do with JavaScript vanilla, like native. Okay, so if that's true, I've got my first framework. I haven't really done anything. I'm going to kind of go to Home and go to Changes, and I'll say created basic site structure, or maybe I'll say added jQuery, sorry guys, jQuery following along, to site structure. That's all I've done, right? And then click commit. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to unsync commits, and I'm going to sync. So if you're following along, then you'll be able to access everything that I have here. Okay, so I've got jQuery 2.1.3 minified, the minified version linked to my document. I've got my code hinting going. One more thing I'd like to add in, and I recommend this as well when you're creating an app, is I want you to right-click onto your project and add, when you go to add, I want you to add something called a reference.js IntelliSense file. So for any other JavaScript libraries we use. When you add this in, it kind of adds in jQuery 2.1.3 and my app.js file. So what it does, it creates a reference path for any new libraries and keeps them in one place. This makes it more compatible across browser too, by the way. It's not just for IntelliSense. Okay, so we've got that in there. It's just a file that sits inside my, that we're not using. And if you notice, it's got that underscore reference path, kind of thing, that basically tells us it's a private JavaScript file that we only use for development. Okay, so we've got this framework now. Now let's get into this example, right? So if we're going to mimic what it says here in our example, I've got this document.ready function, but I don't need that anymore, do I? Because I've got this other function here, this function init that we're calling. Let's test it, by the way, make sure it's working if I haven't made a mistake. Well, we know that if it's running, when I run this, the Ajax demo, and if I go to, I'm going to test it now, I'm going to go to More Tools, and I'm going to go to the bottom where it says JavaScript Console, and then if you notice it says, I'm just going to drag it up so you guys can see, app started, which means I'm accessing this function right here, right? Because I'm doing it on load. So I'm using this onLoad event handler to say when the document loads and the body loads, activate my init function, which sits inside my app.js file. Here it is, right here. That's what I'm doing. So I know I'm accessing this area. So this function init is equivalent to what we see here in our PowerPoint, which is this document.ready function. It's like we're doing that. I could simply not have that and just include jQuery inside my my document and not even have a function. Now, if you notice, jQuery creates this anonymous function call, which is what we're doing, but we're making it a named function called init. That's all the difference is. Who remembers the difference between a named and anonymous function? What's the difference? What's the difference? Cannot call the anonymous function. And why do we have a named function? I mean, not just calling, but what's the other reason? Why do we even bother with an anonymous function? Why do we even create them? Well, sometimes we want a function that's going to be, I hate to say this, temporary or disposable. If you can think about, like, how we use disposable razors when we shave as guys, right? Some girls do. we use them and then we throw them out, right? Well, this is what we're doing with these anonymous functions. We use them and they're temporary, right? They reside in memory when we need them, and then when we don't need them, they go away. So from a memory management perspective, we only use these functions as we need. It's almost like a pay-as-you-go kind of service, right? You pay for the memory when you need it, and then it's gone. It reabsorbs back into the system. It's good and bad. The good thing is it reduces our overhead as we use stuff. On the bad side, it's hard to understand for students. When they look at it, they go like, "What is that? How come it looks that way?" It's just really, kind of really weird. And we want to avoid that as much as possible for clarity. So I'm not going to use this anonymous function, and we don't need to because we already have a name function called init. So we have kind of accomplished two things. Okay, here's our xhr variable. Now here, in this particular case, I haven't really named it. I haven't said var xhr, but I'm going to do that here just to keep sane, right? To make it good, qualified JavaScript. I'm just going to leave this app started in here as the top of our file to know we're still accessing that piece. And I'm going to start typing var xhr. And I'm going to start typing XML. And if you notice, once I do this, Visual Studio comes up with what I need here. Here's my XML HTTP request, right? See, XML HTTP request. I'm actually using this object, right? I'm creating a new, I have to use a new keyword here, right? A new object of this XML HTTP request class. That's what I'm doing. So that's the first thing I'm done with XHR, right? And XHR is almost like a smaller name for XML HTTP request. That's what I'm making. I'm creating a new object, right? Okay, that's the first thing. And the second piece I'm doing, if you notice here, is I'm saying I'm using this onReadyStateChange event handler, right? So there's a couple ways you can do this thing, right? This is the one way that we see it a lot with an anonymous function here. Now, when we do this, xhr is equal to onReadyStateChange is equal to this anonymous function. Actually, what we're saying is the onReadyStateChange event is named now. It's called onReadyStateChange, and we're assigning this function, this anonymous function to it, right? This is definitely one way we could write it, okay? But if you look at the docs, there's other ways to do it as well. Let's try this out. If I go down to XHR, right, and I say onReadyStateChange, right, I can actually type it up. It'll actually come up in my IntelliSense. So I don't have to worry about figuring out how it's written, the tense, and all that stuff. So that's the first thing. Is equal to, all right, and I'm defining a function, anonymous function. This is what this is with some brackets. That's the first piece, right? And if you notice, it says, hey, there's something that's missing here because I've got a bit of a, if you notice, it says, I'm creating this namespace. Once I have these brackets in place, this is the power of JavaScript, this opening brace and this closing brace, immediately when I create that, I'm creating a namespace or a scope, if you will, right? So that's what I've done here. Okay, so I need those external, those external braces, if you will, because I'm defining everything that's going to be going on in here, okay? That's the first thing I need. The next piece is I'm going to check if my ready state is equal to 4 and both things have to occur. When I use the and, this comparison operator here that I'm using, the double ampersand, I'm making sure that both of these conditions, xhr.readystate and the status, are both 4 and 200 respectively. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to get a proper XML HTTP request formed. It's like not connecting properly, and then I won't be able to load anything. Okay, so that's the next piece. So I sit there and I go if, just like that, and then in my brackets, xhr dot, and if I go to ready state, okay, if you notice, everything comes up in my stuff, in my on my IntelliSense and the status. So my ready state has to equal to 4, right? That's the first piece. I'm going to write this a little bit different, and you're going to see I'm going to fix this up here. XHR status, right, is equal to 200. I need both those things to be true for this if statement, this code block to kick out, right? I'm using the parentheses here because parentheses are helping me clarify what my comparison statement is telling me. Okay, here's my code block. So inside here, is where all the work happens. So I'm saying if these conditions are true, then I can do my work. If not, then don't do anything, right? And here's the example of that. So here's my if statement. Here's my code block for my if statement, right? Let's go through it. It's actually ending right here. Okay, so that's the first piece. The other piece is I'm going to define this new variable, and it's not done here, called xmldoc. And actually what xmldoc is going to be, right, as an example, is it's an alias for this XHR response XML. We're creating this new document. That's what it is. We're actually, what I'm saying here is, let's use this variable xmldoc as an alias to this request. That's what we're doing. Okay? It's not creating something new. It's just an alias. It means it's a pointer. It's just saying, I'm just renaming it so it's easier for us to use. xmldoc, which is what we're getting, right? Okay, let's do that. So again, var xmldoc is equal to XML, right? And if XHR dot, and if you notice, these are all the different ones I can access, and I need to put in this response XML, and here it is at the bottom as something I can access. Response XML. This is where it is. var xmldoc is response XML, and now I can start using this xmldoc variable throughout my code. The next piece is I need to declare this, in this particular case, because we're using this team member idea for XML, I need to define a variable to store the things that I'm getting from my tag name, which is going to be called team member, as an example. Team member, right? By the way, we don't have a team.xml file right now, but we're going to create one, okay? Just for the test that we're doing here. Okay, so but we're looking inside this piece right here, this if statement actually looks inside the XML document, right, that we haven't created yet. Okay, so in order for us to do that, we need to create something to hold the team member table, if you will, inside of our a variable, so we can do stuff with it, right? And the same thing goes with, right now, we're going to also initialize HTML, just a variable that's null right now. Okay, we're going to use this later on. When we want to wipe out stuff that's inside the team element. This team element is what we're going to put in our index.html page, where everything is going to shoot into. It's just a container that's going to contain all the stuff we get from inside of our XML file. So our XML file we're going to read with this context or this syntax, and we're going to put the result inside this element in here. Okay, that's what we're doing. So let's actually prepare for that before we go further and write that in. So I'm going to create a div tag where our team members are going to go. It's here, div. And my div tag has to have some kind of ID, and I'm going to write long ways. We're going to call this team. Okay. So inside this div tag, right, is where all the information is going to go for my XML document. Okay. I'm going to save it right now. Nothing's in there right now. It's empty, right? So here's my response XML. I'm going to create a, first thing I'm going to create is this team. And if you notice, what we do here is we say team is equal to xmldoc, which we just defined. And we're saying, because otherwise we'd have to say xhr.responseXML dot get element by tag name, blah, blah, blah. So it was a much bigger request, right? Get element by tag name. Here we can also use, by the way, we can also tag team member with jQuery. But let's leave it like this. This is the JavaScript way of doing it, and we'll use JavaScript for this. So xmldoc dot get elements by tag name, and we're looking for team member as a tag. So xmldoc dot, and then now here's where I don't get my code hinting. Why am I not getting code hinting for get element by tag name? Anybody? Because Visual Studio sucks at it, and most application frameworks, IDEs, unless you're using some proprietary one, doesn't really do a lot of good code hinting for some of this stuff when it comes to Ajax and HTML. this kind of framework. When we use XML, we try and read it, and we're using this. I've just assigned xmldoc as an alias to xhr.response.xml, and it's down a layer in terms of a node because we've made an alias. It doesn't give us code hinting. It only gives us the basic stuff for that's built into the object class. That's for all JavaScript. And this is why I've moved on from using pure JavaScript to going with TypeScript, because TypeScript gives me all the extra code hinting that I want, right? It gives me more power in terms of what I do. Some people like CoffeeScript for the same reason. I'm mentioning it, and we're doing it in on the web game side. We're not doing it here so much. I've talked about it a couple times, but I can't force it on you because it's just too much. How many more things ancillary technologies am I going to make you use? It's too much. So I won't do it. I won't make sure that you use it here. Not yet. Okay, so I need to make that, and if you notice, it doesn't give me the code hinting. Get elements by tag name is what it has to be. So let's write this in. And if you notice, it's got to be very specific in terms of syntax, otherwise it won't work. By tag name. And the elements by tag name that I want to get, if I'm looking for, is team member, right? Team member. And if I'm not wrong, I don't think there's a space. Yeah, there's no space. Okay, so it doesn't know team member. Right now, it doesn't give me an error. Take a look. Get elements by tag name. It's like, hey, JavaScript won't complain about this. It says, we're good, Tom. Right? I guess I know what you're doing, I think. Right? So I'm getting it. I'm creating this team where I'm doing that. Okay, so it's just a holder, a placeholder, or a variable. Here's HTML, which I'm initializing it as kind of null. That's what this is. And now is where I do all the work inside this piece here. And I'm creating a for loop that's basically going to loop through all of my this team member table, right? That's inside my XML document that we're going to create, right? And it's going to loop through each line of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to there's a bunch of stuff that's going on here, by the way, all at once, which we're going to break down a little bit easier for you guys. But actually, if you notice, there's this one big line here, xmldoc.getElements by tag name, and then you're using the dot notation accessor, and we're adding everything else together inside of our node to put everything inside of our XML or HTML. That's what we're doing. Okay, if you notice what this is doing here. So all I'm doing is this one big line. This semicolon here, I've written it here on the slide so it fits into the one slide. Otherwise, I'd have to break it over 2 slides, which I don't like doing too much. So let's simplify this. xmldoc.getElements by tag name. Again, this is something that we have already done over here. But now we're targeting name, and we're using our for loop, this index in the for loop, to start going with the first index, the first piece of our team member, the first team member we're looking at. And we're going to loop through it for as many items inside the team member as we go through. So right now we're going through our first team member as an example. Okay, and there's only one child node, right, as an example for our where we're going to put everything, and that's why we're using this child nodes piece of the get element by tag name. So we're actually targeting this name, and we're looking at the first child node, and we're getting the node value, and we're adding it, and we're creating a big string, and we're adding it to a line break, and then we're getting the title, and we're adding another line break, and then we're getting the bio, and we're adding another couple line breaks. That's what these things are, and we're creating our new content that's going to sit between this div where it's going to sit. That's where we're getting it. So we're loading it up in here from the file, and we're plopping it right in here inside the middle. That's what we're doing. Okay. I know I'm breaking it down like really, step by step, but we have to understand what this is doing and how it's working. Otherwise, if you've never seen Ajax, if you haven't seen this before, you're like, well, I don't get it. Yes.
So do we have some kind of elements in HTML file with the tag names, title, bio, and name?
No. This is another file we're going to, that's what I'm saying. That's why I want to make you understand. There's another file we're going to create in a second. Okay? All right, but let's take a look. So we have to create this for loop. So let's start typing away. So this is where we're going to. So this is our for loop. And again, we're going to say var I is equal to 0, right? And while I is less than team.length, right? And again, we don't, it doesn't give me code scripting because Again, JavaScript doesn't know what the type of team is because we haven't defined it. You can't define types in JavaScript, so it doesn't know if length property even exists, right? And then, but it doesn't error out either, which is dangerous. I++, right? So we're looping through all the team members, the team fields, if you will. And here we're doing it in this code block. Okay, that's one piece. So that's our for loop. That's the outside. Team.length. And now we're going to increase or increment our HTML. We're going to increment our HTML. We're going to say HTML++. When we do this, HTML is nothing. It's a null, right? What does it become when I go HTML++? Does anyone have an idea? It becomes 0, right? There's nothing you can do here. Right now, it doesn't mean anything. But later on, right? Later on, what's going to happen is it's going to point to the next team member. Okay, so let's just put that in there. So HTML++. We can do that. Doesn't mean anything right now because we're adding nothing. We're adding 1 to HTML. That's what's happening. Okay, that's the first line. Then the next piece is let's do this long thing we're going to type xmldoc.get elements by tag name. First, we're going to start off with name and I. Once we do this once, right? If you notice title, bio. Once we do it once, we can just copy and paste. So we're just going to do for the one the first time. Again, we've got this piece right here, right? I'm going to just be lazy and grab this piece and change it, right? And we're going to put it down here. So xmldoc.get elements by ID's got to be in there, right? But instead of team member, now we're targeting name, right? Because name is the next node down, right, from what we're targeting. Name, and then, yes?
Since we've already got team member into the team variable, don't you think we should set team.getElement by tag name?
Oh, up here, you're talking about team, and then get element by tag name up down here, you're talking about team.get element by tag name. You're saying instead of doing this, but what we're actually doing is if we do that, right, we're saying, see here, when I target this, right, it's only for team member. Get elements by tag name is only for team, is only for the team member. This is for each field. Because remember, this get elements by tag name has to include team member if it's team. This is an alias. This team is equal to all of this, including team member, right? So I can't. It would error out, right? I can do a new variable. I can call a bunch of them. I can say name is equal to this. Title is equal to this. Bio is equal to this. If you want me to do that, I can do it. Let's do that just to make you happy, right? So just to be the same, all right, let's do all the same stuff. Now there is no, this is the problem, there is no, at this stage, name. We have to do it here inside of our, once we open up our stuff, we start reading. We can't do that until we're inside of here, and that's why I'm not sure if that would make any sense for us to do. Because we're inside, we won't do it until we start reading the loop, until we start going into the nodes. That's why we can't read them. They don't exist yet. So we're going to get 0. We can, but the problem is that's what's going to happen is we can't access them until we're here. We have to go for each element of the team member. The way we're writing it here. There's different ways of writing it. This is just one way, right? So this is the one thing I can't do. If I go dot, that's why I can't do it. Sorry. Because we're looking at the 0th element here. So we're looking at tag name, the 0th element of that. All right, and then we want to put in, from here, we want to use child nodes, 0, the first child node, and with node value. So child nodes, 0, and the first value, right, which would be node value. We have to spell it correctly, because if we don't spell this correctly, it won't work. And unfortunately, we don't get any code hinting, because JavaScript, doesn't matter which library you use, won't give us code hinting. Plus, we're adding a BR, right, a line break. And the BR, we have to be careful, because what we're writing here in BR is the same stuff we're going to have inside of our JavaScript. So we actually have to put this in as a string, because we're creating our content that's going to go into back into the file. We're going to use a plus here just to separate it. Okay, so I'm just going to make this a little wider for you guys to see. So there's our plus. And now we're going to do the same things. We're actually creating our string, right? And I know why this is written the way it is. This is wrong. Actually, it should be like this.
Just concatenating all the team members into one.
Yeah, the HTML should be equal all this. It's going to be a string of stuff that we're going to do. It shouldn't be plus plus. It's incorrect. Actually, it's a typo. That's what I was wondering. I was like, that's weird.
Shouldn't it be plus?
Which ones? Plus equal, plus equal. Yeah, let's try that. Because I'm doing is I'm adding it onto this. Correct. Thank you. Because what I'm doing is I'm adding this whole string onto there. Now let's just copy and paste. So we'll get this all now. So I've got this first piece. And we'll make sure we have the same thing as we come back. Right? Instead of name, now we know the next field is title. Right? Just follow me here for a second. You'll be like, what does he mean? What is he doing? Right? And then, because we don't have a title yet, we don't have any of this stuff because we haven't created the file yet, so you don't see it. Okay. Maybe we're doing it a little backwards, but that's okay. Actually, I've already described the file and bio with with two line breaks. Okay, so here's bio, and then we're just going to add another line break in here. Copy and paste, just to reduce the sign of errors, and then end it off with a semicolon. This makes more sense, huh? So what we're doing is we're creating this big long string of content that we're going to plop into between the div tag. Okay. Now we don't have this stuff yet. We're going to get it from our file. Okay, so that's the first thing. So we've done all this, and now we're going to say, let's document get element by ID team, and we're going to say the inner HTML is equal to HTML. Now we could do this get element by ID, but here's where we could use our jQuery instead. So we've done this for loop, right, as an example. Right, we've done this for loop, and we can use jQuery for this piece because we know jQuery is active, right? So we're going to say we're targeting team, right, with jQuery, and what we're changing is the text, right? The text as a setter. And if you notice, I can put it in here is equal to HTML. Remember, that's the jQuery way of doing it. It's equivalent to this document.getElement by ID. We're targeting the team ID, and we're saying the inner HTML is equal to HTML. Again, the code hinting is really good on the jQuery. If I type it again, let me show you. So I know I have this dot text open bracket, and it says, hey, set the content of each element in the set of matched elements to the specified text, and the text has to be inside this string value. It has to be inside of our text setter, right? So this is where we're going to put our HTML. It's one little line compared to that big one. Okay, cool. So that's the one thing we've done. We've created this big long line as an example, and we've got this. By the way, there is a shortcut for get elements by tag name for jQuery as well, right? And you could simply replace this long line xmldoc get elements by tag name with the jQuery form. It would work just the same. Okay, so here's our team. We're replacing it, and the next piece after we've replaced it in here is we're going to open the file, which we don't have yet, and we're going to read it, and we're going to send our XHR request, which we create right here. This is this request that we've made, this object, with all the details of what's inside of it. Because remember, this onReady state change defines this anonymous function that we're going to use to send when we've opened the file successfully. That's what it does. It's kind of a backwards way of doing things in some ways, right? So again, we're going to do that right at the bottom. So this is our if statement, which kind of goes in here. We're saying if it's ready, that's good. We've got a positive result, right? And we're going to do that once we get this positive result inside here when this file is ready. Okay, so we're going to do that right at the bottom. xhr.open get. Thank God that works. Our get, right? And we're going to look at actually it gives us some code hinting for our string, our URL. Now it says here team.xml. Is there a problem with this though? Because where does our I think we put false here. Where does our team.xml file, where would it reside? right? It's actually true, not false. Where was it reside? And that's the other challenge. So we're going to send the request, right? So those are the 2 lines. So this is everything we need to read and replace the text inside of our function, but we don't have our file yet. This is wrong because from a code hinting perspective, if we look at it, there's nothing that tells us. I'm just going to stop debugging for a second when we stop this. There's nothing that tells us where our file resides, right? Right now we don't have anything for content. We have assets, right? We have assets. Maybe here we'll create a couple of extra folders. One of them might be images. Oh, if I can spell properly, how about that? I'll put that early in the morning here. Images. And another one might be fonts or something else. But maybe we could also create another section, another folder here, which we don't have yet, called content. And sometimes content is where we keep files like XML or JSON, right? So let's do that. Let's go right-click, right? And we're going to add another folder, and we're going to call that content with a capital. You can also make it lowercase. It's up to you. Okay, so this is where our file is going to be, this content area. So I need to go. I'm sitting inside a script that's inside, what should we call it, our app.js, right? I'm accessing, but this app.js file, right, is here sitting at the index.html level, right? Because remember, my index.html loads things 1 line at a time, right? So as I come to line 19, this stuff is actually embedded inside of our file, right? So I don't have to go outside of the file to do that. It's right here. It's actually almost like, think of it as this script physically sits here in this file. So if that's true, all we have to do is go down into content, and that's the path, content / our team.xml, which we haven't created. So let's create that file. So we're going to add, and if you notice, there's options for a bunch of different things here, XML, HTML, and so on, but there's no XML file. If I go new item, right, it pulls up this dialog, right? And the new item gives me access to other things, JavaScript, style sheet, web form, blah, 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 right? And if you scroll down, or if you look for it, you might have it down here. And if it doesn't really matter because it's like a text file, right? All I need to do is end it off with XML, right? So let's just create a new file and make it whatever we want. So I'll say add, and we'll rename it inside the file here. So I'll say a new HTML page, but the HTML page will be called, which is inside of our content, it's going to be called team.xml. Now once I've done that, if you notice, it takes on that XML format, and now because we've named it an HTML file, it gives us all this extra data we don't need. So we're just going to get rid of it. Okay, now there's nothing inside the team.xml, right? There's nothing in here at all, and we need something in our team.xml file for it to function. And if it's giving us this error, it says XML document must contain a root level element. Otherwise, there is no node. And if you go back to our original document, it should look like, bear with me, like this, right? So XML version 1, encoding UTF-8. We need to put all that in there for it to work. This is what our document's going to look like, right? Our XML document. So let's do that. So we start encoding. So we start saying XML, and again, the piece here is when we start typing, if we do things correctly. So here's our XML. Now, if you notice, it starts prompting us, right? So here is version 1. That's what version we're going to use. So let me show you that again. So it says version. See that? Version 1. It helps us with that encoding style. Like it'll start helping us build our content. See, the encoding style we need is UTF-8, which is what we need. There it is, and we're good to go. Right now, that's our first piece, right? Our first piece of the XML puzzle, because we can't do it without. Okay, so this is our header, if you will. Now, inside of our header, we also have to have. Let me just save this, and it tells us what the error is. It says XML document must contain at least a root level, which we do know as management. We're going to create a root level, right? Here's our management root level. Now, we don't have that error anymore, that funky error, because we don't have a root node. We didn't have a root node before. Now we're going to create our new one, called team member, right? team member is, if I can actually type properly, team member is our next element level, team member, right? Let's take a look, team member, right? And now we need name, title, and bio. So let's add that in. So name, these are properties, right? Title, and actually let's go back and let me just fix that a second. Name, title, and bio. So we're actually creating our first XML document. Okay, and in here I'm going to add a couple things that just to align with what this says here. We'll add in. Let's suppose our team member's name is Tom, right? Because my name is Tom. What the hell? Let's use Tom. And our title will be professor, right? And my bio is computer science professor at Centennial College, let's say, right? Okay, so that's one team member. Do you see how that is? I've defined a team member, our first team member there, right? Now, knowing that this is the format for our XML, right, I can simply just do it again. So I Control C, leave a space just for thing. We can create another team member. Let's call him Mark, right? And instead of a professor, let's say he's a coordinator, right? And he's a coordinator at Centennial College. Instead of Mark, let's call him Ilya. Okay, that's his name, right? I don't know if I spelled it correctly. He's going to kill me when he sees his name, right? Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, so we've got Ilya and Tom. These are the things, and we've got a couple of levels in here in our team XML. Now we're not getting an error anymore because we have a couple things. We have a header for the XML, plus we have our outer layer, which is our node, this team, our management layer, and inside our management layer we have two rows in our table, right, for team member 1, and here's team member 2. Or in this particular case, because we use zero-based in our kind of array elements, this is the 0th node, and this is the first node, right, for team member. Okay, good. Let's see if this thing works. So we're adding everything in, and if everything goes well, if we've done things correctly, we should be able to access team. We're going to get our errors, by the way, and it should plop into this area here. So, and maybe make an H1 tag in here that says team members. So right now we don't have anything in there for team members. Let's see if we run it, do we get what we think we're going to get? And if we don't, what's our error? Because we didn't get it this time around. Let's go into JavaScript console, and it says our app started, and I'm not getting an error. How come?
Because the path of the file, I think we have to say assets folder /d.
Let's try it. Let's try it. Yeah. See, but how come it didn't give us an error here? Because you haven't told it to give us an error. That's why. And we've actually, it doesn't done anything wrong because it's checked, right? And it's done. It's followed our path. It says, hey, we've opened up this request, this ready state, and here's our if statement, but we don't have an else. We don't have some kind of other condition here that says, hey, this is an error. So let's create that. Else console.log, something like, file didn't open, right? Or no file or something, right? Because we weren't able to do this. We didn't get a status of 4 and 200, right? We got something else. And that's why it didn't error out, because it couldn't do this. It just ignored it altogether, right? Let's see if that works, just the way it is. I'm not going to rename anything yet, okay? Okay, let's just go back to this, and then we'll stop this recording and take a short break before we end up. Actually, we won't take a short break. We'll just finish. It's 10 o'clock already. All right, let's just refresh and see what happens. Okay, so it didn't give us an error. How come? Right? Should have, right? Because I said else do this log, right? Well, the reason for that is because it tries to do all that right here, right? This onReady state change says our ready state is if we're ready, and we only care for these two things to read everything, right? This is the key line here, and we should actually, this doesn't throw an error because we haven't asked it to, JavaScript, right? But it doesn't give us the details that we want either. So that's why we don't have anything in here, because it'll never get to this because it can't read the file, right? Because this piece here, this if ready state change will only fire if this on ready state change event triggers, which will never trigger because we have the wrong file. Okay, makes sense? So that's why we don't need this. Okay, let's just make sure things are correct, right? And we're also going to check to see what our HTML is. We can also do, if you want to, just to make sure that we're reading and all that, I can also check to see that we're inside to do some other checks. Like sometimes when we don't know what's happening, if it's actually in here, we're going to say something like console.log, here's our isolation to find our problem, right? And our string message is going to say something, ready state is equal to 4 and status is equal to 200, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't be in here if it wasn't that way, right? We'll never get to this console.log if this isn't true, right? Because it checks. If this is true, then do all this stuff. So let's see what happens. Just, I'm not changing anything yet because I want to see I want to take it step by step so you understand. Otherwise, you won't get it. See? Do I get anything in here? Nada. Why? Because it never gets here. It can never get here because I'm never going to have a ready state of 4 and a status 200 if I don't put the right path. Right? Just to make sure that this is correct, I'm just going to rerun this thing because sometimes what happens is when we don't reload, then you get some funky effects happening, and that would be bad. And if you notice, sometimes you'll notice that so we've got app started, we know we're getting there, but we never get here. Let's change the thing to content. So now it's content. This is the hard-coded path. Team XML. Now we know this is true, right? Because we checked it out before, right? And if we've done everything correctly, right? When I refresh, right, I should get it, and I don't. So what's the issue? What's happening? Is my path still incorrect? Or we made some assumptions, right? Would the path be like this? If I was going to do, just to make sure that the path is incorrect, let's put it back to team. Take away the pathing issue, right? Here, let me show you. And the way to check it before we fix it is take this.
But don't we need to get out of
Yeah. Of course we do. But I'm just making it so that we go through everything properly, right? Otherwise, you'd be like, how come it doesn't work, right? I'm going to drag and drop this team.xml in here, inside scripts, just for now. So I'm going to go one of these. So first I'll stop debugging. Or I'll copy and paste. How about that? Copy, and inside scripts, I'll paste. Right? So there's my team. So I've got a copy of my script in here, just for testing purposes. So now it's on the same level as app.js. Should this work? Let's check it out. Right? So I'm going to run it again. And if everything goes well, then I should get, hey, where's my team members, man? How come it's not working? Let's check out this, this JavaScript console thing. Still not getting this stuff in there. How come? And this is the thing that most people have a problem with. Right? Not just you, but everybody. They don't understand XML. And when we come back, when I pause the movie here, when we come back from break, we're going to fix it, right? And we're going to see how it works.